My wife and I have two children, one of which we love. We actually love both. I know this is on video, right? So we love both equally. But it's been fun. It's been fun for us as our kids continue to grow. They're currently 10 and 13. And as they continue to grow, to just compare our lives to them. One thing that kids are really good at is playing, right? Having fun. And it's interesting when we examine what makes people tick. I have the opportunity to work for Gallup, and as we study the world and what makes people come alive, it's interesting when you ask people what they spend their time doing, it doesn't always equate to what they enjoy most. And what we know is that when you ask people what they really enjoy, they enjoy recreation. Webster's defines to recreate as to make new again or to refresh. And so when you think about kids and just going out to play, right, that's something we all grew up saying and doing and thinking, regardless of what part of the world that you grew up in. There's a sense of, hey, mom, dad, I'm going out to play. Now for us, compared to our kids, when my son was 5 and learned how to ride a bike, a little different than the bike I grew up on. His had shocks, right, just in case there were little cracks in the pavement. But of course, Grandma got him the matching helmet, the gloves, everything to just look the part, play the part. And we were pretty adventurous as parents. We let him actually go, up and down the driveway and then down to the end of the cul-de-sac and kind of come back, right? If you ventured out further than that, it meant we'd have to get on our bikes and actually exert energy and go with him. And so for a while, that was just kind of what we let Joseph do, is he'd get on his bike and go down and ride around. But it didn't take long before he got to the point that he said, Dad, can we ride somewhere else, right? The scenery, it's kind of like, look kids, Big Ben Parliament, right, from National Lampoon. It's kind of like that at some point, it's in our human nature, whether we're a little kid or we're an adult, where the scenery needs to change, where life can just become the mundane, it can become the norm, and so something needs to be different. And one of the things that's really interesting for us is when we think about who we are as people and how we operate. Gallup's been able to study what people are thinking and feeling around the world. And a recent study we did with people in the U.S., we know that there's about 100 million people that go to work on a regular basis in the United States. The sad fact is that only 30% of those people, roughly 30 million people, would say that they're fully engaged in their job, that they love what they do, that they come alive. The other 70% are kind of riding in the cul-de-sac. We kind of feel stuck. Now, for me, growing up as a kid, I also had a bike and would go out and ride my bike with my buddies. The difference was, instead of wearing a helmet, at best, in the early 80s, I was wearing a headband, right? The shirt probably only came to about here, right? And that was only because most establishments had a little sign that said, no shirt, no shoes, no service, right? But so the shirt came about here. We get on our bikes, and we went out, and we just kind of just found stuff to do, right? We were trying to make stuff up. And so we would come across random pieces of stuff, like a milk crate or a cinder block, and we'd say, all right, we need to make something that we can jump, right? We need to do something that would be really fun. And so we'd find a board, and we'd kind of make this little makeshift thing, and we'd grab our bikes, and we'd say, all right, now what is it that we're going to do to really create impact, to really make a difference? And so my buddy Gordy, who probably wasn't wearing a shirt or shoes, right? But my buddy Gordy would get on his bike and he would ride full speed ahead and hit that jump, right? And we were all in awe. And Gordy, from a standpoint of recreation or fun, he was breathing deep. He was excited. He, kind of skid out and like, yeah. And then I had another buddy who wanted nothing to do with this, right? And he was not only wearing probably a shirt, a turtleneck, but tough skins because his mom made him wear those, right? But this kid's on his bike and he's just like, I'm out of here. I don't even want to do this. This is stupid. And then you had guys like me that would be like, I'm stuck, right? I don't want to tuck tail and go home. I want to do this, but I'm scared to do this. And so what I would do, like many of us, and probably many of us in our jobs, is I'd get on my bike, I'd start to pedal, and then I'd coast, right? But I would lose so much momentum that by the time I hit this thing, the whole thing just kind of collapsed. Hopefully I didn't get hurt, right? But for the most part, that's what happened. And when you think about what was missing, it was this sense not just of recreation, but the sense of there was something that inspired Gordy to just fearlessly and courageously take off. There was something that my other buddy wanted nothing to do with it, and then there was something for me that I was just stuck in the middle. And again, when you think about that stat, when you think about the 70-some million people in the United States, and by the way, I said there's 30% of people right in the U.S. that are engaged. Globally, that drops to 13%. This is a global that we have people that are stuck. People that are stuck either coasting or wanting nothing to do with what it is that they do in their day-to-day jobs. One of the interesting things when you think about culture, and simply said at Gallup, we know that we talk to people all the time, and people have different perspectives or definitions on things. We say culture is something that everybody has, right? Whether it's something you want to change or you like it the way it is, everybody has one. I have a colleague of mine that says culture is like a belly button, right? Whether you like yours or not, you have one, right? And so when we go into organizations, what we're basically trying to figure out for them is, what is their culture? What does that look like? How is it that you live? And oftentimes the conversation shifts because they'll start talking about who they want to be, right? And really that's brand. Brand is how you're known. Brand is that sense of, this is what the world says about you. There's a great kind of advertiser of our time, kind of the modern day Don Draper. He's a guy by the name of Roy Spence, and Roy started an advertising firm called GSD&M years ago, and since then they've done ads for Walmart, Southwest Airlines. Every year they've got some Super Bowl ads that they're paid to kind of design. One of the things that Roy has said is when you think about brand in that sense of how you're known, it's got to be fueled or influenced by purpose. There's got to be deep meaning behind it, otherwise you're selling something that's empty. And the same is true when you think about what then drives that brand or that purpose-fueled brand is this sense of culture. And culture can be simply described as just how you live. Because if you live differently than the way you want to be known, then there's inconsistency there. And so the same is true when you think about culture, and you think about these cultures that we create, where only 3 in 10 people are really alive and living from a sense of recreation, which, by the way, those 30 million, those 30%, are the ones that when we study research and look at what have they done, they're the ones who bring the most creative and innovative ideas to their companies. They're the ones who produce the most. They're the ones who sell the most. They're the ones who have the highest customer service scores. They're the ones who are really alive and making a difference. Now, every one of us and our family and friends want to live lives like that, but the question is, what's keeping us from that? And I wonder how many of us exist in cultures where we haven't opened the door to say, is it inspired by a sense of purpose? Jim Clifton, Gallup's chairman and CEO, said, the thing that's keeping that 70% from being fully alive is, in most cases, their manager. We know that, and we published this in a book we did years ago called First Break All the Rules. We know that people join an organization, right? I want to work for them. That'd be a great place to go work, but they quit their manager. And so when you think about the role that you and I play as influencers, for some of us we are managers, for some we're leaders, for some we interact with people every day throughout the day. There was actually a study done by a gentleman named Danny Kahneman. Now, Danny's a behavioral economist who actually won a Nobel Prize. And one of the things that Danny said is when you study just the time we have throughout any given day, every one of us has about 20,000 unique interactions. 20,000 moments in our day where we're either making somebody else's life better or they're somehow influencing our lives. That might be media or other components. But he said there's 20,000 moments that every one of us has in a day to make a difference. And when Jim Clifton, our CEO, talks about this sense of it's these managers, he actually refers to them as managers from hell, right? And we use that term regardless of spiritual perspective and faith for who you are as a person. We know that if somebody says, my life is a living hell, we know that that's not good, right? And if it's euphoric, if they're saying it's like, I love this place, it's like that all-inclusive vacation, right? It's kind of the opposite of that. And so the interesting factor is that these managers, in many cases, are holding these people back. They're not inspiring them. They're not breathing life into them in a way that would make a difference. The word inspire was one that I felt like for years it got used and almost kind of used too much, especially when you're talking about culture. And then in 2007, I had the unique opportunity to talk about inspiration. And when I talked about it, it came from comments that had been made about a person. That person was my mom. She had battled cancer for about 7 years, and in 2007, November 15th, she lost that battle. And when the days kind of leading up to her funeral, we had tons of family interaction. I'm one of 7 kids, and so there were people around all the time. But one of the things that I kept hearing when I was asking people about my mom is they just said she was such an inspiration. Now, to me, again, inspiration was kind of like you hear a motivational speaker, right? One that probably lives in a van down by the river, right? But it's kind of like this motivational speaker comes in and they jazz you all up, and then you just go back to everyday life. But it was interesting, when these people would talk about how my mom was an inspiration, they were talking about the impact that she not only had in their life for that moment, but had in their lives for days to come. They talked about how they would go visit her in the hospital, and they'd bring flowers and candies and things to cheer up. And then her one friend said, and I got there, Jeremy, and I just broke down. And your mom leans over and goes, it's okay, right? And she's kind of making her friend laugh. And she was just a sense of inspiration. And again, the word was sticking, and it kind of made sense, but then it really clicked for me and changed the way I thought about that word for the rest of my life when I reflected back to something my dad said to me moments before my mom passed. I'm the oldest son in my family, and my dad said, my mom was sitting in a chair, and he said, when Mom passes, will you help me move her to the couch so we can lay her back? And his words actually weren't just that sense of passes. That's what I thought I heard. But what he actually said is, when Mom expires. Now, I sort of thought, I'm not afraid to talk back to my dad, but I'm like, Dad, people don't expire. Milk expires, beer expires. But my dad used that word, expire. And when we picked my mom up and we laid her back on the couch, you actually saw her chest cavity come, and this last breath came out of her lungs. My dad couldn't have chose a more perfect word than expire. The word spire means breath or spirit. And so to think about when we inspire someone, we're actually breathing life. That word spire again is breath, spirit. It's a sense of you're breathing life into somebody. When you're inspired to do something, or you're at a sporting event and you're saying, yes, 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 we do. We got spirit. How about you? You're saying, we're full of something. We got this breath of life in us. And when something's expired, you've actually sucked the breath out of it. For too many of us, we go to work in places where people of influence do more expiring than they do inspiring. There's more of them catching us doing something wrong versus doing something right. There's more time spent on, you need to fix this, 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 and this, versus you're so much better at this than anybody else in the world. You guys, there are 20,000 moments that we each have in our day where we need to decide, will we inspire or will we expire? My hope is that you and I would awaken a generation of leaders and managers who could grab those 70 million, or across the globe, grab those 87% of people and inspire them so that they can truly live and recreate. Thank you.